The way they looked at me that night, you would have thought I didn't belong in the same building as them. They never asked if I was all right. They never noticed my swollen feet after 12 straight hours of standing. They never saw the morning sickness I hid behind forced smiles. All they saw was a waitress. A poor African waitress serving champagne at the most expensive charity gala Lagos had ever seen. And before the night was over, they would humiliate me in front of nearly 500 of the richest people in Nigeria. What none of them knew, what not even he knew, was that I was carrying his child. My name is Amara Okoye, and this is the story of how the people who tried to break me ended up watching me build a life they could never control. I grew up in a small village outside Enugu. My father repaired motorcycles. My mother sold vegetables by the roadside. We never had much, but we never slept hungry either. My parents taught me two things that stayed with me long after they were gone. Your name is worth more than money. Never beg for the respect someone should freely give you. I didn't understand those words when I was 12. I understood them perfectly by 26, especially after losing both of them within 18 months. My father died first, a stroke. My mother followed the next year after battling breast cancer we couldn't afford to treat. By the time the funeral ended, I was alone. No brothers, no sisters, no wealthy uncles waiting to rescue me. Just me and a small black suitcase that contained everything I owned. I moved to Lagos because everyone says Lagos rewards hard work. Nobody tells you it also tests how much rejection one heart can survive. I rented a single room in Ajigunle. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The landlord believed repairs were optional. The electricity disappeared more often than it appeared. Some nights, I ate bread and sachet water for dinner. Other nights, I simply slept early, so hunger would fall asleep before I did. Still, I refused to complain. I had dreams. Dreams don't survive if you spend every day feeling sorry for yourself. During the day, I worked at a cafe. At night, I attended hospitality classes. On weekends, I accepted event jobs as a waitress. Every naira had an assignment before it even reached my hand. Rent, food, transport, school fees, savings. No room for luxuries. No room for mistakes. Then, one rainy Tuesday changed everything. I was serving coffee inside the cafe when a man walked in wearing jeans, a black shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Nothing about him looked expensive. He smiled politely. "One Americano, please." His voice was calm, respectful, the kind of voice that made people feel seen. I made his coffee. When I handed it over, he thanked me like I had done him a favor instead of simply doing my job. It surprised me. Most customers barely looked at waitresses. He looked directly into my eyes. "I'm David." I smiled politely. "Amara," that should have been the end of it. Instead, he returned the next day. And the next. Soon he knew my schedule better than some of my co-workers. He asked about my classes. He remembered my exams. He encouraged my dreams. Never once did he flirt carelessly. Never once did he make me uncomfortable. For the first time in years, someone seemed interested in knowing who I was rather than what I could do for them. 3 months later, he asked me to dinner. I almost said no, not because I didn't like him, because I couldn't afford embarrassment. What if the restaurant is expensive? He laughed. "We're eating suya." I stared. "Suya?" The best restaurant doesn't always have a roof. That night, we sat on plastic chairs under a roadside canopy eating spicy beef with bottled Coke. No designer suits. No bodyguards. No expensive watches. Just laughter. Real conversations. Simple happiness. He told me he worked in business. I assumed he managed a small company. I never asked for details. Money had never impressed me. Character did. Months passed. We became inseparable. For the first time since my parents died, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. One evening, while watching the Atlantic Ocean from Tarqua Bay, he took my hand. "I've never met anyone like you." I laughed. "You should meet more people." "I'm serious." "So am I." He looked at me for several seconds. "I think I'm falling in love with you." My heart froze. Nobody had ever said those words to me before. Not like that. Not with complete honesty. I whispered, I think I already have. If life were a movie, that would have been where the music swelled. Instead, real life interrupted. David received a phone call. The moment he answered, his entire expression changed. I have to travel. When? Tonight. So suddenly, it's family. He looked troubled, almost frightened. I'll call you every day. He kissed my forehead before leaving. I promise. For 2 weeks, he kept that promise. Morning, afternoon, night, then the calls became shorter. The messages became fewer. Until one day, they stopped completely. I tried calling him. His number was unavailable. I sent texts. Nothing. Emails. Nothing. Weeks became months. I told myself something terrible must have happened. Then I wondered if I had imagined everything. Maybe I had simply been abandoned. People at work told me to move on. Men disappear. Forget him. You were just entertainment. Every sentence hurt, but none hurt as much as discovering. 6 weeks later, why I couldn't stop feeling sick. The pregnancy test showed 2 bright lines. I stared at them for almost 10 minutes. I checked the instructions 3 times. Then I bought another test. Positive. A third. Positive. I sat on the bathroom floor of my tiny apartment and cried until sunrise. Not because I didn't want my baby. Because I didn't know how I was going to give my child the life they deserved. I whispered while holding my stomach. I don't know where your father is. But I promise you, you will never feel unwanted. From that day forward, every decision I made was for the tiny heartbeat growing inside me. I worked longer hours, ignored the nausea, smiled through exhaustion. No one at work knew. My loose uniform hid my growing belly. Until one afternoon, my supervisor walked over holding a gold-colored invitation. Amara. Yes, ma'am. We've been hired to serve at the Adeyemi Foundation Charity Gala. Everyone gasped. The Adeyemi family, one of the richest families in West Africa. Politicians, foreign investors, royal guests, celebrities. Getting selected meant extra pay. I desperately needed the money. I'll do it. She smiled. Good. Be at the Imperial Grand Hotel by 5. I had no idea that accepting that shift would change my life forever. The ballroom looked like something from another world. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings taller than my entire apartment building. Women glided across polished marble floors in gowns worth more than 10 years of my salary. Men laughed over glasses of imported wine while discussing investments worth billions of naira. I adjusted my serving tray. Just do your job, Amara. One more event. One more paycheck. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome tonight's guest of honor, the Chief Executive Officer of Adeyemi Global Holdings, Mr. David Adeyemi. The tray nearly slipped from my hands. No, it couldn't be. I slowly turned toward the grand staircase. And there he was, the man I had spent months mourning, walked into the ballroom wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, surrounded by security and flashing cameras. The quiet man who once shared roadside suya with me was one of the wealthiest men in Africa. My heart stopped. Then something even worse happened. His eyes met mine. For one brief second, recognition flashed across his face. Before either of us could move, an elegant older woman standing beside him followed his gaze. She looked at me, then at my uniform, then at the slight curve beneath my apron. Her lips curled into a smile, so cold it made my skin crawl. Without saying a word, she started walking directly toward me. I remember every sound from that moment. The soft music drifting through the ballroom, crystal glasses clinking together, the quiet laughter people who had never worried about choosing between rent and food, and then the sharp click of expensive heels against polished marble. Every step that woman took toward me felt deliberate, controlled, as though she had spent her entire life making people smaller, simply by standing in front of them. She stopped less than 2 feet away. For a second, she looked me over from head to toe, not the way one person looks at another, The way someone inspects damaged furniture before deciding whether to throw it away. Then she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that warned you trouble had already arrived. "So," she said softly enough that only I could hear, "you're still around." I swallowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Do we know each other?" Her smile widened. "Oh, I know exactly who you are." A strange feeling settled in my stomach. She knew me, but I had never seen her before. She glanced briefly toward David. He had started greeting politicians and business leaders. His attention had already been pulled in 5 different directions. She looked back at me. "You should leave." I blinked. "I'm working." I wasn't making a suggestion. Her voice remained perfectly calm. I said, "Leave." I tightened my grip on the serving tray. "I can't abandon my shift." She leaned closer. "Then you're making a very expensive mistake." Before I could answer, our event supervisor hurried over. "Mrs. Adeyemi." The woman nodded politely. "Grace, I hope everything is satisfactory." Mrs. Adeyemi smiled warmly. "Everything is beautiful." Then she pointed directly at me. "Except her." The supervisor immediately turned toward me. "Amara?" Mrs. Adeyemi lowered her voice just enough to appear discreet. "I don't appreciate having distractions. Serving at my family's event." My supervisor looked confused. "I'm sorry." Mrs. Adeyemi's eyes dropped to my stomach. "The young lady appears pregnant." Several nearby guests turned to look. I instinctively placed one hand over my apron. I can still perform my duties. Mrs. Adeyemi ignored me. "This is a luxury gala." She spoke loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. "Guests pay millions to attend. They shouldn't be made uncomfortable." I felt heat rising into my face. Uncomfortable? Because I was pregnant? The supervisor shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, she's one of our best staff members." Mrs. Adeyemi smiled again. "I'm sure she is. But appearances matter." One businessman nearby chuckled. Another woman whispered something to her husband. Within seconds, people had started staring, not at the decorations, not at the stage, at me, the pregnant waitress. I wanted the floor to open beneath my feet. Instead, I stood there, frozen. My supervisor looked torn. She needed this contract. Everyone knew who the Adeyemi family was. Refusing them could destroy her business. She finally turned toward me. "Amara, I'm sorry." Those 2 words hurt more than I expected.